this is Roger, thanks for dropping by, and I've stuck that bit on the front because I don't know how many pieces this video is going to be, so if this is going to be on a piece on its own, I've said hi rather than just start rabbiting. I've got the two large pieces that I ended up with of the Coelogynes Moriana, Magnifica to be precise, and in addition to that there's a little Coelogynes somewhere, there we go, which is Nitida, which also needs potting. So I've got three Coelogynes, two the same, two biggies and one little one. Now I went and did a little bit of work on the Coelogynes Moriana just to make sure, really. Basically it's more of a cloud forest dweller than anything else, so it wouldn't want high temperatures, or it wouldn't get them. If you got high temperatures then the cloud would disperse. So not high temperatures. And the one thing you can virtually guarantee in a cloud forest is everything's soaking wet virtually all the time. So I've got a conflict of interest here. The media was in, so I'm just putting some noisy bark in. So I've got an air cone here, so I just don't want the air cone blocked. What I need is the ability for this to dry quite quickly during the winter, because effectively it's almost dormant in the winter, so it wouldn't, although it would have very heavy moisture around it, the airflow would be bordering on the extreme in its natural environment, which I can't do. I can't have fans blasting away in the winter when the temperatures are lower. So the idea is to have a mix that when it's a bit of a drinker in its growing season in the summer, it's got moss in here to help it stay hydrated, but I've got a mix of small bark with some large bits in, and the combination of those two should enable me to dry it off a bit quicker in the winter when I do have to water it. Although it goes virtually dormant in the winter, you can't not water this sort of plant that comes from a rainforest, a cloud forest, because it would still be wet. And even if it didn't get rained on that often, it would still be wet. So it wouldn't be dry. But the sort of air movement you get in those places really is extreme. That went all over my feet. Could you try and stay in the pot, please? So I'm trying to balance the act, if you know what I mean. Both of these pieces had reasonable roots, and this one's going to be a bit of a pain because it's already got one growth here, which is a new one, so that needs room to swell up, and that was the last new growth, which is going to end up quite near the side of the pot, so I'm going to try and get it right in the middle so that both of those bits have got a bit of room either side of them. It is an epiphyte at the end of the day, but it's you've got to bear in mind an epiphyte growing in a cloud forest is not the same, because it's never going to totally dry out. It's always going to have the high humidity around it in the air, and whatever it's growing in and around and on is also going to be wet most of the time. So it's never really going to be totally dry, but it does go quite dormant in the winter. Well, it's not up to much. That's the bit that I need to cater for, is allowing it to rest a bit in the winter. And then I'm just going to put some larger pieces of bark around the top, because I don't want the base of the pseudobulbs to be soggy. So just some large bark will just help steady it. I reckon I can get away without staking that. I did get some stakes out just in case. But I have noticed, having taken it out of that huge pot, it seems quite a deep rooter. It almost looks like a terrestrial to me with its root system, but I looked it up in several places just in case the first one I checked was wrong. They all agree these are epiphytes, so they're tree dwellers. But you have to bear in mind you can get an awful lot of debris and quite dense moss on branches in a cloud forest. So anyway, that's that one done. I might stake that in a minute. It does look slightly wobbly, but it's about to push out new roots, so that'll keep it still. Right, and then the other piece, what I've got here, is something that will be easier to control, because I've got a new growth here and a new growth here. So if it's going to shoot out, it's going to be about around this area. I did think about taking this big bulb off the back, but that's a hell of a storage organ for this plant. That's a massive bulb. So I decided to leave it. But you can see what I mean about the length of the roots. Yeah? These look bad roots, but they're not. They're firm. They're covered in tiny little hairs. That's its nature. So again, we'll have some chunky stuff in the bottom, a bit of drainage, and also let the air in, because this isn't an air cone pot. This piece had the deeper roots, the longer roots, so we decided to go to a flat bottomed pot to give these roots somewhere to go. Right, where's the front of the plant? There. See, these roots are just going to have to be coiled round. And if you want to know the easy way to coil roots is to start putting it in the pot and twist and making sure they're in the pot, and just keep twisting and they will naturally follow the path of the pot. And it's a more gentle thing than trying to force it with your fingers, and then they end up all being in the pot. I doubt if I'm going to get away without staking this one somehow. Okay, so down the back. See, in theory, if it's an epiphyte, it wouldn't matter too much if there were air gaps. But it's just the type of epiphyte it is. As I say, a cloud forest dweller is going to have a lush environment for its root system. You know, it's not just going to be hanging on a bare branch somewhere, you know, half the day in the sun. It's not that type of epiphyte, not in a cloud forest. Totally different environment. You know, that everything's covered in moss and dangly moss and all sorts, and you've just got this constant wet atmosphere. And that's why some things grow so well there, and probably wouldn't do so well without that really high humidity there all the time in the air. But I'm just trying to make sure that this back bulb's not really buried, so I'm just pushing that down a bit harder around the back. Don't need that part of the plant really in much at all. It's only there to hold the plant still, really. So this bit round here that's going to produce the roots, if anything does. And looking at the pattern of the plant, it almost looks to me as though the roots, the new roots, come from the previous bulb. So it's like the new growth pushes out, which starts the roots on the bulb behind it. Now, that might just be coincidence, and that's what it looked like, but that seemed to be what was happening with it. That one's quite steady, not too bad. So that's the two biggies done. Now we've got the little one. And again, I'm adding moss to this knowing I'm cutting my own throat. There was quite a large break because we had to wait for the bleeding to stop. I'll show you why. That was in the moss, and that went right in my hand. That is gorse, thorny bush basically, and it is in, whoops, don't put it back in there, you do it again. But yeah, basically as I was on film, I thought we'd better not have red stuff dripping all over the moss. It looks quite pretty because it's sort of like, you know, if you've ever done watercolour painting when you put a drop of paint in a puddle. So we had some pretty coloured moss, but I thought we'd better not film that. We'll have people keeling over in their chairs. I remember once being asked, aren't you squeamish? Doesn't it worry you about seeing blood? And I said, well, as long as it's somebody else's, no. But some people are, you know, so are on the side of caution. And I'm getting all the muck and dirt in the hole I made, so I'll live. Right, no drainage in this one because this is quite a good little root system, and I'm cutting my own throat here because basically by putting these three plants in a mix of bark and moss, I now have to repot them more often. But that's my bit. and we get away from this leaving stuff in pots too long. You know, you take it on. If you're going to go for organic media, then repotting will need to be done. And you have to just accept that. And quite honestly, unless you've got a plant that really doesn't like being disturbed, I don't see any reason why. Just get on with it, quite honestly, and not worry about it. The plants seem to appreciate the new media around them. And what they don't appreciate is media breaking down, you know. So you take your choices. I mean, you can go for inorganic media, then you don't get the problem. But to me, it doesn't seem natural, you know, growing in, well, pebbles I agree with, and I would gladly grow in the river rock and stuff like that if I grew outside and my plants were getting rained on a lot. You know, they'd get that lovely washing effect, and I'm sure they'd appreciate that, but not in this country. Right, so I've left a fair bit of room at the front of the plant. The plant's effectively a line, so it's difficult to sort of put it anywhere other than in the middle of the pot. And then whatever these two growths are, they're spikes, I don't need to worry. If they're new growths, they've got some room to grow, and that is going to wobble, so that will need a stake. I'll do the staking in a minute. You've seen me do stakes often enough. All I'll do is push a stake down next to that centre bulb, yeah, and tie it near the top of the pseudo bulb. And once that one is secure, then all the rest of the bulbs are attached to it, so that'll stop it wobbling. So just put a tie around there. So that's the 3 Coelogynes done, and I'm going to keep them entirely separate. So see you next time.